Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Broxtowe series, 10 parishes with an industrial past running along the western fringe of Nottinghamshire. Where are we today, viewers? Welcome back to the borough of Broxtowe again, everybody. Now, it's really early in the morning here. It's before 6 AM. It's the ideal time to visit a nature reserve because there's literally nobody around. I'm going to have the place to myself. I'm going to take myself down that path in a moment and it'll lead to the headstocks of a former colliery. And that colliery belonged to Brinsley. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Brinsley, Brun's clearing. With 3 to go in Broxtowe, today we come to Brinsley, another village of the Erewash Valley with coal mining close to its heart. Situated just west of the Brinsley Brook and right on the border with Derbyshire, Brinsley was famous for its headstocks that once belonged to the local colliery. Tall and proud, they stood here until late last year when they were dismantled, sparking widespread outrage across the district, especially in former mining circles. Brinsley Colliery opened in around 1842 and closed as a working pit in 1934 when the seams were exhausted, but its shafts were kept open until 1970 for access to neighbouring mines. Brinsley once produced 500 tonnes of coal a day and employed 361 men. Among them was Arthur John Lawrence. He was the father of the famous author D.H. Lawrence, who would reference the mine in his short story Odour of Chrysanthemums and in his 1913 novel Sons and Lovers, where the colliery is referred to instead as Beggarlee. The headstocks also appear in the opening scenes of the 1960 film adaptation of the book, which won an Academy Award for Best Cinematography. Even though the headstocks are now gone, mining is still what Brinsley is all about. Let's explore it and take in the same sights and sounds that D.H. Lawrence wrote so fondly of. We start with what was Brinsley's most well-known landmark until last year. Our walk starts in a nature reserve south of the village at the site of the Brinsley headstocks. These were one of the last reminders of the village's mining heritage. Brinsley headstocks were unique. They stood here until late 2023 when they were deemed unsafe and dismantled. Made of timber, they were the UK's only remaining tandem set. Their removal caused widespread outrage, not just in Brinsley but beyond. Residents feel any replica erected here now wouldn't be the same as the actual headstocks themselves. So ordinarily that would have set the scene for the economic and industrial history of the village. There are loads of other clues though that this was an area once dominated by underground activity. Somehow even the architecture of the houses on Church Lane suggests that mining was in this place's blood. And it's a pretty big village, large enough that I even considered using a bus for part of this route. I stayed on foot though, but Brinsley has several stops served by the Rainbow One to Nottingham and Alfreton. Next to that bus stop is a parish notice board, and Broxtowe is now down to the last 2. The headstocks might have disappeared, for now, but they live on here thanks to the Headstocks tea room and takeaway on the next corner. If you look south from here, you'll see Dot Hill. Although within Eastwood's boundaries and not Brinsley's, the massive mound simply can't be missed. It's a former colliery slag heap, reclaimed from the mining days. It sometimes gets called Dirt Hill, or rather humorously, Bum Hill. Call it what you like, I certainly wouldn't want to climb it. We're now on Hall Lane, and here's the old phone box, now a book exchange and an information point. Brinsley's not short of pubs. Just up the road is the first of a few, the Lion. It used to be called the White Lion some years ago, but now sports a shortened version of its old name. Although led very much by its kitchen for most of its trade, it remains a traditional local. Apparently, it even has a 9-hole crazy golf course, according to its website. It's far too early in the morning for that, plus we've got to move on to the next landmark. Up Church Walk we go now, through some more housing typical of a mining community. This eventually becomes a footpath and runs to the moor. Where the road ends is a modern cemetery, and the churchyard is opposite. Among those buried in Brinsley are the grandparents of the author, D.H. Lawrence. Another grave belongs to Joseph C. Gething, who contributed to the building fund for the Church of St. James. This was built in 1837 and 38 using bunter sandstone from quarries in and around Mansfield. The chancel was added later, in 1877. The most recent extension was consecrated in 1996, and the churchyard was closed to burials 2 years later. We can walk right through this and back onto Church Lane once again. Okay, so we've been going for just over 25 minutes at this point, which isn't bad, to be fair, considering where we started. Now, so far, you've seen most of the mining history and some of the older stuff here in Brinsley, but Brinsley is split into two parts. You've got this southern section, which we're almost done with, but to the north, there's another section that's called New Brinsley, which extends over the district boundary and into Ashfield. Now, of course, I'm not going to walk all the way into Ashfield, but I will walk up to the border and just show you exactly where the border actually is. So yeah, let's carry on into New Brinsley. Now, just before we hit New Brinsley, we have Moorlands Nursing Home. This can cater for a maximum of 40 residents in 38 rooms. Although it's loosely defined, on the next corner you could argue that we've reached the village centre. Brinsley Fish Bar stands before us, but part of this building is also a micro-pub. Named the Go-Between, this features a weekly quiz night every Tuesday and offers free chip cobs into the bargain. If you win the quiz, you also get a bottle of wine too. I guess if the alcohol goes to your head, you can always go next door for some pain relief. Brinsley has a pharmacy too. At the other end of Moor Road is Brinsley Primary School. Brinsley's school history is rather unique. This one is situated on a 5-acre site made up of a forest school and garden areas and a greenhouse maintained in part by its children. It's also got a massive school field. The buildings you see here are pretty modern, but the oldest part of it, this section here, still stands. Originally this wasn't a school. Instead it was a Victorian hospital and only became a school in 1914. Now we're into a housing estate which offers some fine views of the Erewash Valley and the surrounding countryside. You don't realise it until you're actually in this area that all the time you've been climbing. It's just been a series of gentle inclines rather than one enormous scaling. Even this path is uphill, but again you don't feel it much. This takes us to Main Street and towards the Broxtowe-Ashfield border. Sat almost on the border is the Durham Ox Pub, another named after the famous shorthorn steer which toured the country in the late 1790s and early 1800s. Unlike the Lion, this is more of a community pub, offering traditional pub games, an open fire, and a separate lounge served from a common bar. So once you get beyond the Durham Ox, the border with Ashfield starts to come into play. You go over the border into what is Underwood, which of course is in the parish of Selston, which we saw a long time ago now, back end of last year, I believe. So yeah, from this point we need to turn around and head back the way we came. We've come from the south, we've come all the way up to the north of Brinsley. We're going to turn down Clumber Avenue, this will form a nice little circle, and it'll go down Broad Lane next towards the recreation ground. Clumber Avenue is where I would have caught the bus back to the start, if I'd decided to use it. Instead, through this we come to the backbone of New Brinsley, Broad Lane. A road which is exactly what it says on the tin. Broad Lane is bang straight and pretty darn wide, giving it its name. From this you can get to practically anywhere, and once again you can tell most of its houses were built with mining in mind. It's certainly not flat though. In the 1960s, Broad Lane was the residence of a former village postmaster called George Mills, and that fact brings us neatly on to our next major landmark. Well, with Broad Lane being a really long road, it seems like it goes forever, but the end is in sight over there, and we're going to be heading into the recreation ground in a moment, which is our last major sort of landmark before we hit a path that will take us back down to the Brinsley Headstocks. So yeah, let's carry on. The recreation ground is the beating heart of the local community. This massive field features a playground, the bowls club and the Brinsley Parish Hall. It's also the venue for the Brinsley Carnival, a fundraising event organised by a group of volunteers traditionally held on Father's Day. It originated as an early 20th century hospital parade where local farmers and growers would dress carts and sell produce to raise money to send the sick and injured to hospital. That man, George Mills, resurrected it in 1960 after it had stopped thanks to the onset of the two world wars. Back to the road now, and here's Brinsley Garage, which has been owned and operated by husband and wife team Willis and Jill for some 34 years. As Cordy Lane makes an eastwards trajectory towards Underwood, we pass through Holroyd Circle, the newest area of housing anywhere in the place. An old railway line will return us to the beginning. This was a spur off the Watnall branch of the Midland Railway, and it ran to the collieries at Brinsley and Underwood, serving them both. Long since lifted, the old track bed is now a wide footpath which skirts the edge of Brinsley Parish. Okay, so it's pretty simple from this point. It's just a case of following this old railway line back to where the headstocks should be and the car park for them. And that's basically Brinsley. I've been going for about an hour and a quarter, which is not bad for a Wednesday morning. Nice little trot around in the early morning, atmosphere. Should we say atmosphere? Early morning atmosphere. It's quite good. The sun's not quite breaking through those clouds, so it's not terribly warm, which is fantastic. And yeah, I've got my juices flowing, if you like, and they need to be as well, because the next episode is going to be a much longer walk than this. But you're gonna have a long wait for it, I'm afraid, people, because I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with the next one. It's a big episode, so hopefully you can wait for it. After passing over the Brinsley Brook, a small stream which you can hear alongside the old line at points, you come to the car park for Brinsley Headstocks. Rounding off the walk is the final pub, the Brinsley Lodge Inn, ideal should you wish to follow in my footsteps. I found one rather damning review of this pub which claimed it was stuck in a 70s time warp and needed its interior updating. Personally, if it still serves good food and or good beer, I honestly couldn't care what it looks like. The pub and the Headstocks car park are at the parish's southern tip, but there is one final landmark. Keep your eyes on the left of the screen as we drive away towards Eastwood and you'll see an old chapel. As well as this one, Brinsley Hall once had an ancient and now lost Catholic chapel dedicated to St Chad, where human bones have been dug up before now. On that note, we're done, and that's Brinsley. See you all later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.